Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our new series for this year, which we're calling Letters for Living. And we're going to be studying a broad spectrum of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's letters to many people about a wide variety of subjects and issues and life challenges that people have dealt with. In addition to what we're going to be starting with, which are not letters that are responding to other people who have reached out to the Rebbe, but these are pastoral letters. I just felt that it was very timely for this time of year, which is before Rosh Hashanah, and perhaps we'll select a few before some of the other holidays. The Rebbe was a true leader of the Jewish people, and you can sense that by the fact that he wrote letters addressed to the Jewish people. So I'm scrolling quickly. I'm looking myself to the second letter for a moment, which you don't have to go to, but he addresses it, and I'll tell you why I'm going to the second one. But he addresses it to my brethren everywhere. God bless you all. I don't know if there's another Jewish leader in the world that wrote letters to the entire Jewish people. The third letter is addressed to the sons and daughters of our people, Israel, everywhere. Again, the Rebbe was very unique about this, which tells you how he saw himself in relation to the Jewish people. That he actually saw himself as one who cares about every single Jew, and therefore he actually addressed every single Jew. That itself is very exceptional, extraordinary, unique, and also sort of defines for us who the Rebbe was for the Jewish people. And he would send these pastoral letters as a way of giving a message to the Jewish people before an upcoming momentous occasion on the calendar, typically, and in order to inspire and guide and focus us in a certain direction. So we're going to be studying many other letters. I'm going to try and bunch them together when I can in themes, but sometimes we'll be jumping back and forth between themes because to go through all of the letters that I'm going to be selecting is going to take me quite some time. So I've gone through a bunch, and some of them are going to be more universal. Some of them are going to be more personal. Some of them you'll be able to relate to very well. Some of them you'll know other people that you can share this letter with, etc. If you have any questions at any point in the middle of a letter, the best thing would be in this class to unmute yourself as opposed to writing in the chat box. But if you want to write in the chat box, I'm going to try and periodically check it, but I'm not going to keep my eyes on it throughout the entire class. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that. Or if someone wants to just mention to me that there's something notes in the chat box, I'll go there as well. Okay, so with that, let us get started. And I selected 4 of many pastoral letters the Rebbe wrote to the Jewish people before Rosh Hashanah. And I thought this was very timely as we're just 2 weeks out from Rosh Hashanah, which is going to be 2 weeks from tonight. I hope everyone knows that, has that marked on your calendar, and I hope everyone will be celebrating appropriately. Most importantly, hearing the sounding of the shofar on Tuesday and Wednesday of Rosh Hashanah, and on Monday evening we have Rosh Hashanah dinner where we dip the apple in honey, etc. So this letter was written in the year 1950. This is a significant year because the Rebbe actually is not yet the Rebbe. His father-in-law has passed away, but he has not yet accepted the leadership of the Chabad movement, even though many of the Chabad Hasidim, accepted, are treating the Rebbe as if he is the Rebbe, even though he has not formally accepted it yet, which he won't do until about maybe 5 months later, on the anniversary of the passing of his father-in-law. That's when he formally accepts the leadership. So that's why it's interesting that in this letter, he addresses it as dear brethren. He doesn't say to all Jews wherever you may be, which is interesting. But the moment he's a formally Rebbe, he does do that. So this letter was written on the 18th day of Elul, which is a significant day on the Jewish calendar, because the 18th day of the Elul is the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov and the birthday of the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, the author of the Tanya. So two very key figures in the flourishing of the Hasidic movement and of the Chabad movement. And here's what he writes. So, dear brethren, God bless you all. On the threshold of the new year, every one of us, man and woman, pauses to draw up a balance sheet of one's record in the past year. So immediately he's already taught us something that you may or may not know, and that is that during this month that we are currently in, which is the month prior to Rosh Hashanah, which is in Hebrew the month of Elul, we are meant to do what any diligent businessman does. And the reason why businessman is a great analogy is because business people who are in business are very serious about making money, which is what business is all about. And when you're serious about making money, you can't just be a person who is busy, because busy doesn't mean income. Busy means busy. Some people are very good at being busy, but they're not very good at making money. So the key is to ensure that you're making money. And the only way you can ensure that you're making money is if you draw up a balance sheet every once in a while and you have a record of what's going out, what's coming in, and making sure what's coming in is more than what's going out. So this is really what we are meant to do with our lives. What do I mean by our lives? I mean what our lives are dedicated to and how we're doing in regards to that. So what are we living for? Which is not really which is only a partially subjective question. It is very much also an objective question, meaning that in a very general sense, what we're living for is not optional. We were put here by design by God, and therefore we are put here for a purpose. Within that general purpose, we each play very distinct roles, and that's where it would get more subjective to each person. But when we take our spiritual lives seriously, then we think about, what we've been doing with our purpose here on this world, how we did this past year, how focused we were, how dedicated we were, and how the results went. Or more importantly, how our efforts went. But typically, the results will be commensurate with our efforts. And that is someone who's taking their life very seriously. And we do that specifically this month. Now, the reason why we have a dedicated time to do this is because it's very unhealthy for someone to go through constant introspection, which is very damaging. And we'll see in some other letters that the Rebbe writes, where he guides people about this, is very unhealthy because when we're in a constant state of introspection, then it does not keep us in a very uplifted and happy space. Introspection is something that's serious. And when we're focused on, things that we slipped up on, that we can do better with, it doesn't always put us in the best frame of mind. And so therefore there should be designated times when one is reassessing themselves. But other than that, a person should just be moving forward. And then you have a time of assessment. That can be once a week. It can be once a month. And then annually, it's once a year during this month. So we resolve to better ourselves and pray. And so what do? We resolve to better ourselves, and we pray for a happy year materially and spiritually. We pray for a happy year materially and spiritually. Why do we pray for a happy year materially? Because for a couple of reasons. We need to be blessed materially in order to be able to function spiritually. That is the nature of being human, that we are souls in bodies. The body is material, the soul is spiritual, and our body needs to be able to flourish. And the more our body is flourishing, the more our soul can potentially use the body in a very productive way. So that's why we have to we ask God to give us a happy year materially and spiritually. Another reason why we ask for material blessing is because our mission in this world, in large part, is to transform the material world to be of service to God and transparent to God. And so, in order for that to happen, we need to have materialism. And once we have the materialism, then we can dedicate it to divine purpose, to spiritual purposes. So the Rebbe continues, and he's gonna in this letter, he's going to actually lay out a fundamental theme, which is a very rare theme, I think, throughout the world in general, and even within the Jewish world. And that is, he emphasized greatly, and this emphasis, I want to say, really began with the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, who writes this in Tanya. But the Rebbe really emphasizes greatly in our day and age. When I say our day and age, I mean beginning with 1950, which may seem a little bit ancient right now, but it still applies to us in 2025 without a question. And that is that a Jew cannot only think about their own. I mean, let me say this. This is a Torah concept. This is not invented in any way by the Rebbe or by the Alter Rebbe. However, they emphasize this greatly as the need for this to be a focus for every one of us. And that is that we cannot simply care only about our own spiritual needs and our own material needs. But just as we care about our own material needs, which we must and we should and we have responsibility to, likewise, we should be caring about the material and spiritual needs of a fellow Jew. So by way of example, if you feel that you're gaining something significant from this class, then you should share what you're doing with a friend of yours, so that you can actually influence others to be exposed to this, the great guidance that the Rebbe offers. And that may be one of the greatest gifts you can give to a fellow Jew. That's what the theme of this letter is going to be, and it becomes one of the fundamental themes of the Rebbe's leadership, while the Rebbe is not yet formally the Rebbe. So this is what the Rebbe says. Our sages say that giving tzedakah, charity, to the needy opens the way for our prayers to bring us good health, prosperity, and happiness. If we want our prayers to be heard by God, one of the ways to get our prayers, to open the way for our prayers, to bring us good health, prosperity, and happiness, is through the mitzvah of tzedakah. Okay? Now, this is the reason why we have a custom, which the Rebbe encouraged in an endless number of letters for Jews to do, that every morning before they pray, as he would write it, put a few coins into a charity box. A dollar bill also works, which is what I do every single morning before I pray. In fact, this month I put in $2 every day before I pray. It's very easy. It's not burdensome on a financial level or on any other level. And when we do something to help another, and then we ask God to help us, now we're negotiating properly. That's the point. But what we're going to see also is that tzedakah is not only about money, even though this is a very classic and literal way that we express this idea. But tzedakah, charity, is not only about money, it's about helping another person. And we're going to see that can be done in many different ways. So the Rebbe says, man possesses a body and a soul. And just as there is material poverty in food, clothing, and shelter, right? All fundamental ways that we can help another person who's in need of these things. So there is spiritual poverty, where the deficiency is in spiritual things. How can someone be spiritually pure? They can be spiritually poor in their knowledge of the Torah, in the observance of the mitzvos, and the practice of good deeds. So a person can very easily be poor spiritually. And the Rebbe is emphasizing that we have a responsibility to the spirit of a fellow Jew. That's where he's going with this. Said our sages, how are we to understand the words of the prophet? When you see a poor man, clothe him. That's what the prophet says. Surely also in this sense, when you see a man lacking in the knowledge of the Torah, take him into your house, teach him the Shema, encourage him to fulfill the mitzvahs, teach him Torah. So the Rebbe is saying that when the prophet says, when you see a poor man, you should clothe him, it doesn't only mean a literal clothing, and doesn't mean a poor man physically, only that, but it also means someone who is poor spiritually. So if we find a fellow Jew who is poor, we have a responsibility by the fact that God exposed us to them, that we have encountered them, to offer to them what we can. There are smart ways of doing this. There are productive ways of doing this. The more we do it, the better we understand. We learn how to do this productively, but the responsibility remains the same regardless. When we are about to appear before the Supreme Judge on Rosh Hashanah, we must take stock, each one according to his own yardstick. The possibilities and opportunities one has. What is your yardstick? Our yardstick are the possibilities and opportunities that God gives us. And those opportunities and possibilities are designed by God personally, by putting us in certain environments, in certain situations, encountering certain people, so that we can have influence spiritually, that we can help this poor person by giving them tzedakah. As to how well we have practiced both materially and both as to how, so we have to take stock, each one of us based on our own circumstances, as to how well we have practiced both material and spiritual deeds of charity and kindness. How have we practiced both materially and spiritually acts of kindness with our fellow Jews? So I recently had, some of you may know, I recently had a surgery a couple of weeks ago. It's exactly 2 weeks ago. And when I met the surgeon, he was a Jewish man, and I asked him if I can have 5 minutes with him before the surgery. And he said yes. And when I was in my gown, ready for the surgery, and he was in his scrubs or whatever they're called, he came into the room I was waiting in. I was nervous because I didn't know quite how I was going to have time to 5 minutes with him that he promised me, considering the setup. Thank God I'm not so familiar with surgery. But after he gave me the rundown of the whole surgery and everything, I said, "Can we take our 5 minutes now?" And he said yes. And I put on tefillin with him. And the last time he put on tefillin, I think, may have been his bar mitzvah. And that was an opportunity for me to give someone who is spiritually poor tzedakah. And that's exactly what the Rebbe is talking about. And I have no doubt that there are many times. In fact, I just remember I had a meeting with a gentleman last week, and I had meant to put on tefillin with him before he left, and I forgot. And that was a lacking of mine. So that's part of my taking stock of how I was this past year. See, even as the poorest among the poor has opportunities to practice acts of kindness towards his fellows, so you may know that the mitzvah of tzedakah is an obligation on every single Jew, which means that even a Jew who lives off of tzedakah, that means that he is funded by a community fund or something, whatever it is, because he's poverty stricken, he has responsibility as well to give tzedakah from the money that's given to him. Obviously not lavishly, but something he has an obligation to give. So even the poorest among the poor has opportunities to practice acts of kindness towards his fellows. So has the spiritually poor man opportunities to benefit others through exercising good influence upon his friends and neighbors in the observance of the Torah and mitzvahs. And the Rebbe is saying that even though someone may say, "I'm spiritually poor myself, who am I to bring this to another Jew?" But from the little bit that we have a responsibility to give tzedakah to a Jew who is more poor than us, who doesn't have that yet. And I suspect everyone in this class surely has plenty to offer, because there are plenty of Jews around you who have far less than you do, spiritually speaking. And naturally, the materially wealthy and spiritually rich, among the latter, the spiritual leaders, yeshiva students, etc., must be lavish in their acts of tzedakah, in money and time, in behalf of their brothers and sisters who are less fortunate than they, to save them, heal them, and strengthen them, body and soul. So the Rebbe is emphasizing something very big over here, and that is that, generally speaking, in the Jewish world, there is spirituality that is very much self-focused, and that is, am I being a good Jew? Am I being a servant of God? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? And it's very, very self-focused. And what the Rebbe is beginning a revolution with here is a revolution of not making Judaism about you, but it's also about everyone around you. I'll tell you a beautiful story that with the Rebbe when he was a little boy. Just you can see already his greatness when he was just a very small boy. He was 3 or 4 years old, and his mother, who we refer to as Rebbe Tzimchana, he was living in Yekaterinoslav and Dnipropetrovsk, whatever the name of the city changed, but that's where they were living, and they were going to the seaside during the summer on a hot day. So his mother was taking him to the water, and when they were and the Rebbe was wearing a yarmulke, right? And when they were going, there was another Jew who was a secular Jew, secular Russian Jew, who saw the Rebbe with a yarmulke on his head. See, he said, "Yingel, young boy, Sizeir Haste, it's very hot. Nemar up the kapel, take off the yarmulke." So the Rebbe responded to him as a little boy. The Rebbe responded to him and said, "Mitarnished, that I'm not allowed to." Right? What did he mean when he said he's not allowed to? That Hashem wants me to wear a yarmulke. So I don't take off. I don't go anywhere without a yarmulke. In fact, in the code of Jewish law, it states that a man should make an effort not to walk 4 amos, which is 6 feet, without a yarmulke, without their head covered. So the man didn't let up, and he said, the sin, which we call Navera, the sin will be on me. If mine plates is on my shoulders. It'll be my sin. You don't have to worry. I'll carry the burden of guilt. So what did the Rebbe say to him? What difference does it make whether it's your sin or my sin? Now, if you think about this for a moment, you'll notice how profound this is, and how the Rebbe, as a little boy, already saw the collective and also did not see himself, his Jewishness, or the religiousness as about him, but it's about every Jew and about what God wants in this world. Because what he was essentially saying was that even if the sin would be yours, that doesn't make the world any better or any worse. In other words, whether it's my sin or your sin, what? So that's a personal thing, my sin or your sin, but it's not personal. Is this an act that God doesn't want in the world? And it makes no difference if I'm the one doing it or you're the one doing it. That's how the Rebbe saw the world. It was his worldview. And he saw every single Jew in particular. He saw this regarding the Gentiles' responsibilities as well, but every single Jew, that we all have responsibility to our fellow Jew. It's not only about me doing what I'm supposed to do, so I'm good because I'm fulfilling my responsibilities. No, you have to make sure that another Jew also is given the opportunity to fulfill their responsibilities, which often they don't do simply because they don't know. They weren't educated. That's most often the case. They weren't educated, they don't know, or the transition from the way they were raised to this new reality is a tough one. So they need a lot of reminder, encouragement, support, etc., etc. So this is very revolutionary to the extent that the Rebbe even says, as he writes here, that yeshiva students, they should already be trained that they shouldn't get lost in their own self-righteousness, but they should always be doing a little bit to help another Jew. And that's why, until today, Chabad yeshiva students, every Friday afternoon, go out to business places to put on tefillin with other Jews for this exact reason. This is exactly the message that the Rebbe is giving here. So the Rebbe concludes this letter: May our merciful Father in heaven inscribe every one of us all unto a good and happy year, materially and spiritually, and bring us the true redemption through our righteous Mashiach speedily in our day and our time. Amen. Wishing you and thanking you for your wishes of a ksiva v'chasima tova, which means to be written and sealed for a good year. And you see how the Rebbe signs name here, son-in-law of the late Lubavitcher Rebbe of saintly memory, because he wasn't yet formally the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Now, when someone is the success in someone doing this often is attached to personality. Sometimes we are of a personality that's a little bit more shy, and therefore we don't have as easy a time, encouraging other people. And we all know, what happens when we go to a fellow Jew and we start telling them about Judaism. Are you going to hear the shofar on Rosh Hashanah? Would you like to come to our home for a Rosh Hashanah dinner? Some people roll their eyes, they this, they that. When did you get so religious? And all the comments that come with it. But there is a conviction that we slowly grow into, where we can really understand that we are investing in something very, very precious, really the core of what we are in this world to do. And the more attached we are to that, the easier it is for us to go to another person and offer them something, an opportunity, and from the Rebbe's, as the Rebbe would, say as well, that, for example, if you knew, God forbid, that you saw someone has a lump, God forbid, somewhere on their body, right, which they're not noticing, but you can see it's a little bit subtle maybe, and you say, what is that, right? You should see a doctor, right? Would you hesitate to tell it to your friend? If you really felt that your friend had some serious illness, would you hesitate to tell him you should really see a doctor? Without a heartbeat, you would tell them that. It's critical for them. That's exactly how spiritual things are for a Jew. It's critical for their living their life meaningfully and living it to the purpose that it was put here for them to plug into what God has instructed us to do. Again, it has to be done wisely, it has to be done delicately, it has to be done productively and encouragingly, etc., in the right way, which we would learn how to do better and better on the job. But that is a responsibility that every single one of us has. So don't be intimidated by the rolling eyes, and don't be intimidated by the comments that people make. They should know that you have real conviction around this. And when they do, that actually itself is part of the influence. Anyone have any questions or comments before we move to the second letter? You'll have to unmute yourself if you do. Okay, so let's move to our second letter. The second letter, the focus of this letter is the purpose of the Jewish people in this world. This may feel, I usually feel that this message is a little bit spiritual, which means a little bit challenging for us to actually absorb. But it is very important for us to know this, because, if you ask someone, why do you go to work every day? I would hope that they have an answer to that question, which goes to the very core of why they go to work, which can be varying answers. But I would think that for many people, the answer is to make a living. That's great. Because if you know you're going to work to make a living, and you discover when you do your checks and balances that you're not making a living, then you know that you got to do something, got to change something. Something's off over here. Very important to know what our purpose is in something that we do. Then we can assess it and we can determine how well it's doing. Some people go to work for other reasons, because their work offers some type of a meaning. A nurse that really finds it meaningful to help people. If there's an environment where for some reason they feel that they're no longer helping people for whatever reason, then that would question, whether they should continue doing what they're doing, working at this place or whatever it may be. So it's very important for us to know, if someone were to ask us, what is your purpose in this world? to at least be able to answer in a very general sense at first, what is the purpose of a Jew? Why did God create the Jewish people? Like some people, especially in today's day and age with anti-Semitism being as sky high, defending the Jewish people. But what are we defending? Like, what are we defending? I once asked a gentleman who came into my office. Who was insisting that I get a gun. That's his thing. Jews need to protect themselves. Every Jew at 22, if you're familiar with that phrase, and I should get a gun, which I'm not inherently opposed to. I just don't feel that I need it in Newtown. But and I know that can be debated. Everyone has different opinions about that, and God bless everybody. That's fine. I just don't feel it's pressing. But regardless, he was very adamant about it. So I asked him if he put on tefillin today. See, he said no. I said, why don't you make a commitment to putting on tefillin every day, and then we'll discuss me getting a gun. He said, well, tefillin, what does tefillin have to do with it? You need to protect, it's dangerous. People do crazy things today. You need to have a gun. So I asked him, you want me to get a gun to protect Jews, right? I asked him exactly what are we protecting? Maybe we should just dissolve the whole Jewish thing. And that's it. We'll end the whole anti-Semitism will be gone. We'll stop the Jewish thing, and anti-Semitism will be gone. What are we upholding? Is this our heritage that we've become too attached to let go of? Like, who needs the Jewish people? And really, what I was asking him was, what are we living for? If you want to protect something, first make sure you have something to protect. So if we can be clear about what it means to be a Jew and why God created a Jewish people that the whole world hates and why we are so important and we're dedicated to that. Now we have something to protect. Okay, so now we can talk about the guns. It was all my way of just trying to bring out the idea that it's very important for every one of us to be able to answer to ourselves first and foremost, and then afterwards to anyone who would ask us, so we can enlighten our fellow Jews around us as to what is the unique purpose of the Jewish people. And this letter was from 1953. So the Rebbe, and this year is already the Rebbe for 3 years. And this is his message that year. So by the grace of God, this was the first day of Slichos. Slichos are special prayers we start saying before Rosh Hashanah, which we're going to actually start saying this year on Saturday night. We always start on this Saturday night, but this year it's going to be this Saturday night. And to my brethren everywhere, so here you see the language is changing already. The Rebbe is sending this to all Jewish people. God bless you all. Greeting and blessing. On the threshold of the new year, may it bring blessings to us all. I send you my prayerful wishes for a good and pleasant year, materially and spiritually. So again, he's blessing the Jewish people first and foremost, that everyone should be blessed with a good and pleasant year, both materially and spiritually. It is significant that the anniversary of the creation is not celebrated on the first day of creation. You may know this. We've said it many times in our shul. I probably said it in classes, that the anniversary of creation is not celebrated on the first day of creation. When do we celebrate the anniversary of creation? The new year is the anniversary of creation. We say on Rosh Hashanah, Zeh hayom tchilas ma'asecha. This is the beginning of your works, God. And then we say Zikaron, it's remembrance Liyom Rishon, to the first day. So on the one hand, we're saying this is a remembrance of the beginning of your works. I mean, it's the remembrance of the beginning of creation. But then we say it's only a remembrance of the first day. And that is because, as you may know, Rosh Hashanah is the anniversary of the sixth day of creation, not the first day of creation. If you don't know this, remember this. It's a great trivia question to bring to your Rosh Hashanah table. Is Rosh Hashanah the anniversary of the first day of creation? And the answer is no. It's the anniversary of the sixth day of creation. Why on the sixth day? The day when man was created. Because what did God create on the sixth day? He created the human being, Adam and Eve. And that's the reason why we're going to see Rosh Hashanah is the anniversary of the sixth day of creation. Rosh Hashanah marks the beginning of a new year. That year was the year 5714. For us, it's going to be 5786. Since the creation, a new date in the cycle of time, and everyone hopes and prays that it will also be the beginning of a new era in one's personal life. That's what we all hope for. We come and pray to God that He should bless us with a year like none other. It should be a whole new era, one that is good and sweet materially and spiritually. It is significant that the anniversary of the creation is not celebrated on the first day of creation, but on the sixth, the day when man was created. This is very significant. Why would we not celebrate the anniversary of the world on the day it started being created? Why on the sixth day of creation? For a very significant reason. Although all other things making up our vast universe, which in Hasidic philosophy, we break down all of matter into four categories, which is the inanimate, such as a stone that shows no sign of life, the vegetable, something that shows a sign of life like vegetation, which grows, and living creatures, which are animals. The fourth category is the human, which is a conscious being. So the inanimate, vegetable, and living creatures and the animals preceded the creation of man. God created everything before creating man. That's the first 5 days of creation. As is related in the Torah, in the first chapter of Genesis. So when we read the Torah, the very beginning of the Torah, this is what we read. The 6 days of creation, seventh day of rest. The creation of man, nevertheless, it is on the anniversary of man's creation that we celebrate Rosh Hashanah. And on this day we say, this is the day of the beginning of your works. So we call the day when man was created the day of the beginning of God's works, even though God already created most things in the universe before. Herein lies a profound lesson for every one of us. Man, the microcosm, the small world, contains within him all the four kingdoms, into which the macrocosm, the universe at large, is divided. Everything that you find in the broader world, you can find within a single human being. In the course of his life, man passes through the stages of inanimate, vegetable, animated existence until he reaches maturity and begins to live a rational and spiritual life of a human being. So the Rebbe is saying that you can say that in the progression of a human development, a physical human development, that an infant you may say is inanimate, sort of stationary. Then they start moving around. They become more like the vegetative. Then like an animal that can actually take things for itself. Compete, fight, defend itself. It's more of a child, an older child. And then you have when we bar bat mitzvah, when we become responsible, we're mature, we reach maturity. And that is when we start functioning, we have the responsibility to function as a full functioning, mature person. Even then, in his daily life, he may experience a varied existence. Even as a mature person, he can find all four of these elements playing out, as reflected in his deeds and actions. That part of the time he may be regarded in the category of the inanimate. There may be times where a person is not being, we'll say, productive at all. They're like a stone. At other times he may vegetate. He may have some growth, some minimal growth, or live in animated existence, a much more vibrant existence, similar to the animal, which has more life. But a true human being he is when his activities give evidence of his intellect and spiritual qualities. When is a person being a true human being? When he lives up to his intellect and his spiritual qualities. This is a key, his spiritual qualities. So when we get in touch with our intellect and our spirit, that is when we are living as a human, which is what we are. Moreover, the name of man is justified. The only time we are justified in calling ourselves a human, a man, is justified only then. When also those areas of one's life and activities which correspond to the animal, vegetable, and even inanimate kingdoms are sublimated, elevated, and sanctified to the level of the human quality. When we take all of those lower levels of operating and we raise them up so that we are operating as a intellectual and spiritual being. That's when we're being human. This is the man that God created on the sixth day, and which we celebrate on Rosh Hashanah. So Rosh Hashanah and the 10 days of repentance, introducing the new year. Let me explain that. So Rosh Hashanah is on the first day of the month of Tishrei, and we know it's a 2-day holiday, so it's on day 1 and day 2. Yom Kippur is on the 10th day of the month of Tishrei. And from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, how many days do you have? 10 days. We call that period of time the 10 days of repentance. So Rosh Hashanah and the 10 days of repentance is introducing the new year, is a time for self-evaluation and mature reflection on the profound lessons of these solemn days. We see, which the Rebbe didn't emphasize strongly over here, but he does in other places, that the reason why we're celebrating Rosh Hashanah on the sixth day of creation is because everything God created until the sixth day of creation, this is the point he's making here, is for the human being. We are the purpose of creation. God did not intend to make a world with vegetation. God did not intend to have a world with animals. That wasn't the purpose, right? The primary purpose. That's a secondary purpose. The primary purpose was the human being who has free choice, which we're going to see in the next letter. A human being that is a conscious being, that is an intellectual being and a spiritual being, so that the human being interacts with the entire world and makes it aware of the spirit that we come from, which is the divine spirit. So just as the world and all the world begins its true existence, an existence befitting the purpose of its creation, from the day man was created, when did the world begin being an existence of purpose? Once the human was created, because the human is a conscious being, so the human can make the world aware of and use the world for divine purpose. And that's why we find something very interesting. From the day man was created, man, immediately after coming to life, proclaimed the sovereignty of the creator to all the universe. The Torah teaches us that the moment after man, Adam, was created, what did he do? He said, Bo'u, come, nishtachave v'nichra, let us worship, let us bow down and kneel before God our Maker. The very first thing Adam did was start inviting creation to acknowledge God, to come bow down to our Creator, our Maker, inspiring the whole universe with this call, thereby making all the universe an abode for the divine presence, carrying out the inner purpose of the creation. So what is the inner purpose of the creation? He just said it right here. Thereby making all the universe an abode, a dwelling place, an environment that is aware of the divine presence. God specifically designed a world, which is our world, which naturally hides the presence of God. That is what nature is. Nature is the appearance of something being normal, even though when you begin to think about it, it's not normal at all. It is not normal that from a little seed, an entire apple tree with hundreds of apples can grow. It's only normal because it became natural. It happened so many times that we just say, yeah, it's normal for the sun to rise, and it's normal for a seed to grow a tree. But really, it's not normal whatsoever, right? From a little seed to this whole tree to come about. And when we begin to think, we begin to realize that actually there is the divine operating everything. And that is insight and getting in touch with the truth of reality. And that is the responsibility and the mission of the Jewish people to make ourselves and the rest of the world aware of. So each and every individual must realize that his whole essence and purpose consists in the predominance of the true human element of his being, that what should dominate our life as often as possible, in as many moments as possible in our life, is the dominance of our human element, that we are conscious and spiritual beings, and the humanization of the inanimate vegetable and animal parts, and to raise up the inanimate, the vegetable and the animal parts to this human level of which it is composed. It is not enough at all. A very interesting emphasis that the Rebbe makes. It's not enough, but not enough at all. If part of his time and effort correspond to the behavior of a true human being, if only part of his time is dedicated to human, see, the guy says, like we often do, I'm religious when I'm in synagogue. I'm religious when I'm home. We sort of, we find times that we're going to be religious, so to speak, or do Jewish things. But the Rebbe says that's not enough at all. But it is absolutely necessary that the man should inspire, sublimate, and elevate and sanctify all his component parts, including the animal, vegetable, and inanimate, in order that they too respond to the call, come, let us worship, let us bow down and yield before God, our Maker. He's encouraging us to make this all-encompassing, to make this our life mission, that even when we have to go about our duties in this world, right? We have to go to the mechanic to get an oil change. But when you're there, right, there can be an opportunity to raise up more of the world to awareness of God. Like, when the person asks you how you're doing, and what do you say? Thank God, fine. That's living up to the mission of the Jew. When you're sitting there and waiting, and instead of scrolling through some nonsense, you you study some Torah, you say a blessing before you eat something. All of these are ways of us bringing the awareness of God to all different aspects of the universe. And that is exactly what Adam did. He said, come, let us worship, let us bow down and yield before God our Maker. Such a life in accordance with the commands of the Creator, a life in accordance with the Torah mitzvahs which God our Maker has given us, and only such a life justifies one's own existence and justifies thereby also the creation. He makes a very bold statement. The Rebbe is very good at making bold statements. And he says, if someone wants to be able to justify their existence, then the only way we can do that is if we are in fact fulfilling our purpose, our divine mission, why we were put here. And that is making the world more aware of the divine. And what that does also is, it also justifies creation. Because the whole reason why God created an environment which is unaware of God is that we on our own become aware of God. And the ones leading that mission are the Jewish people. With the traditional blessing of Ksiva L'Chasima Teva to be inscribed and sealed for a good year, I remain cordially yours. And you have the Rebbe's signature there. By the way, I put some lines after each letter in case you have notes or comments or an inspiration you have as we're going through them that you want to write down. That would be a very good thing to do. And by the way, you take an idea from any of these letters and bring it to your Rosh Hashanah dinner. Bring some awareness of God to your Rosh Hashanah dinner with a very beautiful message that should speak to everybody. Any questions before we move on to the next letter? All right, this is great.
Quick, were back in the 50s, were these letters written in English or Yiddish?
That is a great question. The Rebbe did write a number of letters in English, had them put out in English. He had one of his secretaries was his English writer. He had a secretary that dealt with foreign languages. The Rebbe spoke all these languages themselves, but he had people he would dictate the letters to, or they would write and then he would edit them. He would tell them the theme. One of his most prominent English redactor was a man by the name of Rabbi Nissen Mendel. And I'm blessed to have our son-in-law Nissen, who's named after his great-grandfather, who was Nissen Mendel. So these specific letters I am not sure. I would have to look up to see if they are originally in English. I'm not sure. Any other questions? Just unmute yourself. Okay, very good. So we're going to move on to the next letter. Letter number 3, the unique qualities of humanity. To sons and daughters of our people Israel everywhere. God bless you. Greetings and blessings. On the eve of Rosh Hashanah, I extend my prayerful wishes to my brethren, every Jew and Jewess in the midst of our people, Israel. The time-hallowed traditional blessing of Shana Tova Umesuka, a good and sweet year. First thing is, may God just bless every single Jew with everything that they need. Before we even start with a message. The celebration of Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the year, has been ordained by our Torah to take place on the anniversary of creation. So similar to the previous message, that Rosh Hashanah is the anniversary of creation, but not on the first day of creation. It has been made to coincide with the 6th day of creation, the day when man was created. The significance of this day and of this event is not in the fact that a new creature was added to creation. The significance of the 6th day is not that, okay, God created this, and this, sun and the moon, the stars, the animals, vegetation, and then he created man too. No. But on the first day of right? A creature one plane higher than the rest of the animal kingdom, as the animal is superior to the plant and the plant to the mineral. So the significance of this day is not that God now created even a more elevated being. At first, there were inanimate objects, and then there was vegetation, and then there were animals. You see, it keeps on ascending. And now we have a human. The significance lies in the fact that the new creature, man, was essentially different from the others. Man is an entirely different reality. It's like, as we say, a different ballpark. For it was man who recognized the Creator in and through creation. It is only man who recognizes the Creator in creation and through creation. And what is more, brought about that elevation of the entire creation to that recognition. And what man also did was elevated all of creation by helping creation recognize this, and thus to the fulfillment of its divine design and purpose. And in that way, man was fulfilling his divine design and purpose. So I hope if someone were to ask you, which very likely children often ask this question, and if we don't have a clear answer to the question, they may not have an answer the rest of their life, which would be a tragedy. And that is, what are we here for? What is expected of us? Why did God create all of this? And the answer is so that we and all of creation be aware of the divine, aware of God. One of the main distinguishing features which set man apart from all other creatures is the free choice of action which the Creator bestowed upon him. The only creation of God that has free choice is us, is humanity. No other creation has free choice, not even your beloved pet dog. Animals are instinctive. Yes, they can be trained to an extent, but trained is not free choice. It's trained, right? Free choice is I can do one or the other, and I have a conscious mind to make a choice between one or the other, where my emotions are not the overriding factor of what determines, or my instinctiveness. My instincts are not the overriding factor of why I do things. Now, man, as we know, can live as an animal, and that is when we live instinctively. But when we start to train ourselves not to live instinctively, that's when we're living as a human, and that's what makes us unique. We can choose. That's why "you made me say that" is animalistic, not human. Because that would be me believing I don't have free choice. And I had to say it because you made me say it. When in fact, we always have free choice. So man can use this special divine gift in two opposing directions. He may, God forbid, choose the way leading to self-destruction and the destruction of everything around him. Or he can choose the right way of life, which would elevate him and the creation with him to the highest possible perfection. Right? So we can either be destructive people, or we can actually make things ourselves and things around us aware of the divine, right? And bring them to the highest possible perfection. And to help us recognize and choose the right path, we were given the Torah. Why do we have the Torah? For that reason. God says, I'm giving you the responsibility, and I'm giving you a Torah to guide you in this. Which is the divine and eternal, the Torah is divine and eternal. Hence, his teachings are valid for all times and in all places. He throws in a very key point here. The divine is infinite. Something that's safe and infinite is beyond time and beyond space. And therefore, being that the Torah is divine, the instructions of the Torah are beyond time and beyond space. If someone were, God forbid, to say that a commandment in the Torah is outdated and does not apply to today's day and age, that is a heretical statement. Usually people who say that don't understand what they're saying, but because essentially what they're saying is that God is time bound. God, who created time, is time bound, which would be a ridiculous statement philosophically to even make. So even logically, we can understand this. So to think that anything God commanded us would be timely when he instructed it as a universal truth forever would be ridiculous. Now, sometimes we may struggle at different times throughout history with certain commandments based on the culture of the time and the mindset of the time. That doesn't change the fact that everything that God instructs us in the Torah is eternal for all times and all places. It is not possible for man to make his choice unaided, merely by virtue of his intellect, for the human intellect is limited. We have a problem. God's wisdom is infinite, and human intellect is limited. So it's not possible for a human only using their intellect, which is where many, many Jews get stuck, because we want to understand, but the mind can only understand so much, because we are only that smart. And it's not very smart when you're comparing it to the infinite, right? So the intellect can only serve to discover and bring forth the inner absolute intuition and faith in things which lie beyond and above the realm of the intellect. He says something very powerful. He said what the intellect can do is it can serve as a tool in order to help us discover and bring forth a deeper knowing, which we call an intuition, and a faith of what there is beyond even what the intellectual mind can understand, which of course is God. The faith and intuition, which are the heritage of every Jew, and this is what makes us Jews unique, is that we have this embedded deeply within us, this awareness, therewith to illuminate the entire being and to guide him in his daily living to a life inspired by Torah and mitzvos. On Rosh Hashanah, man stands not only before the divine judgment, but also before his own. Not only is there divine judgment on Rosh Hashanah, but there should also be our own judgment. Not necessarily judgment in a harsh way, but judgment as in assessment. The verdict of his own judgment with regard to the future must be that he takes upon himself to fulfill his duty, that is, to work for the fulfillment in himself and in his surroundings of the call. And what's the call? Come, let us worship, bow down, and kneel before God our Maker. A call for absolute submission to God, which was first sounded by the first man, Adam, on the day of his creation, on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. First day of Rosh Hashanah is the anniversary of the sixth day of creation. Sixth day of creation is the day man was created. What did man do when he was created? He called out to everything, all existence around him, and said, come, let us worship, bow down, and kneel before God our Master. Let us submit ourselves to the source of everything, and let us recognize that. And that is our purpose. That's what Adam did, and that's what we are called upon to do. And in our own judgment of self, we have to judge how well we are doing in that regard and how we can do better. And he must once and for all abandon the opposite road, which can only lead to destruction and doom. Through this can only be attained through a life inspired and guided by Torah, right? As we learned, because a human being in their own intellect can never fathom the infinite truth of God. So we need to reach to a divine source, which is the Torah, give us access to that which is beyond our own comprehension. And as the Rebbe says, that he must once and for all abandon the opposite road. What is the opposite road? The opposite road is a road that is all about myself, that my life is about me, not about God. Let no one think, who am I and what am I to have such tremendous powers of building or destruction? A person can say, I'm just a simple guy. What? You want me to build the world, to bring this awareness to the world? Can I do that? So the Rebbe says, for we have seen to our sorrow. You remember, this year is the year 19, oh, we don't have a day, 1955, 54. This is the year 1950. Wait a second. 1 second. It is, I'm sorry, it's the year of, yes, he's running in the year of 1955. So in 1955, he's saying, for we have seen to our sorrow what even a small quantity of matter can do in the way of destruction through the release of an atomic energy. You're saying that you're just one little person in the world. What impact can you have? Tragically, we've seen in our day and age how much destruction can be created from one atom. If such power is concealed in a small quantity of matter for destructiveness, in denial of the design and purpose of creation, how much greater is the creative power entrusted in every individual to work in harmony with the divine purpose. For in this case, one is also given special abilities. God gives us special abilities once we go on that path, that we commit ourselves, and opportunities by divine providence. And then all of a sudden, opportunities by divine providence we encounter, where God has encountered circumstances and people to attain the goal for which we have been created, the realization of a world in which each creature shall recognize that that God didn't create him, and every breathing soul shall declare, that God did create him, and every breathing soul shall declare God, the God of Israel, is king, and his reign is supreme over all. We say that on in our Rosh Hashanah prayers with blessing, Aksiva v'chasima teva. So we have very, very clear instruction here from the Rebbe, and inspiring messages about Rosh Hashanah. And we are going to conclude here, unless anyone has any questions. 1 second, let me see. Does this class go until 11? No, it goes until 10:30. Yes, I'm sorry. I just went a couple of minutes over time, but we are concluding the class now. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Everyone was quiet. I hope that's a good sign. But if you have any comments or feedback, you can make them or you can email me. But otherwise, next week we'll do one more letter on Rosh Hashanah. And then we're going to start going to various different themes, which will keep it really interesting. We'll be bouncing back and forth on different forms of life guidance. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Looking forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.